Let me let you in on a little secret about Columbia, South Carolina. So over the last year, we went over all of our closings from all of our clients that called in looking to relocate to Columbia, South Carolina. And we wanted to figure out where they actually end up moving to. And it turns out 98%, if not 99%, did not actually move to Columbia. That's right, they moved to many of the suburbs around Columbia. Typically, it's because they were looking for that slower pace of life. Higher rated schools, some looking for new construction, where others were looking for a little bit more land. All those benefits that come with suburb living. And that's why in this video, we're gonna be breaking down the top areas people actually relocated to right here in the Midlands of South Carolina, the Lexington, Columbia, and Lake Murray area. And stick around to the end as we dive into a sleepy little town that's been popping up more and more. And not only for me, but statistically too, so you'll wanna see this. So we get started in Elgin, South Carolina. This is a small rural town with a population at the most recent census coming in at 2,882. Year over year growth, they saw 0.209%, with a population density coming in at 485.18 people per square mile. All right, so as we get kicked off here in Elgin, I'm gonna be breaking down these areas so you can learn a little bit more about them, the average prices, what new construction is available, and so much more. And so as we get kicked off in Elgin, I'm gonna break down these areas because it can get a little bit confusing as I explain these, especially when we talked about the population, right? Because you have the town of Elgin itself. It's an incorporated town in Kershaw County. And we'll talk about that in just a second here, the different counties and so much more. But so this is that town limits. And so obviously that kind of equivalates to that population we talked about. Now, as we roll over, I'm going to switch the map. And this is the zip code of Elgin. So typically when we are talking to people about Elgin, this is kind of the area we are really referring to, right? This entire area. And it's kind of interesting because you do have some areas over here in Richland County, the Wood Creek Farms neighborhood that land in that Elgin zip code. But for the most part, we consider Northeast Columbia. And so again, I'm going to dive into that and some of the other areas we talk about a bit more because it's a bit more confusing, but I hope this kind of puts it into perspective. Again, a majority of it is going to be made up of Kershaw County. So this is all going to be considered Kershaw County right here. And on this side is going to be Richland County. And we'll dive into the Richland County side a little bit more later because like I talked about, neighborhoods like Wood Creek Farms do land in that Elgin zip code, but on the Richland County side that we consider more Northeast Columbia. But again, let's focus on Elgin in this and that Kershaw County side of things. And so Elgin itself is actually a pretty small town. I'll dive in and show you that in just a second here. But as you can see, distance-wise, you're not too far from kind of Lugoff. You start to get some shopping here. And then really as you roll into Camden. And so to give you an idea, Camden is about 12 miles, 18 minutes. And you have a ton of shopping down there. I recently did a driving tour of it, really quaint downtown. You got a Walmart over there, restaurants, and so much more. And then of course, heading back this way into Columbia, on the northeast part of Columbia, you have the Villages at Sand Hills Mall. Outdoor mall, there's a Sam's Club over there, tons of different shopping, and that's going to be 7 miles, 12 minutes from here. And then of course, Columbia, downtown Columbia from Elgin, you're only talking about 25 miles, 30 minutes to that area. And so again, that's why a lot of people are tending to like this area because it's not as urban as per se northeast part of Columbia that we'll talk about later. It's more that rural feel, but you're still within 30 minutes of so much. It's not like you're having to drive forever and a day because again, diving into downtown Elgin here, you can see Food Lion, Bojangles, Dollar General, IGA, not a whole bunch in that area. Now, Risa did a driving tour if you want to learn more about this area and kind of see the ruralness of this area. But this is why I think people are starting to like it more and more, just because it's not as densely populated. But I think this dynamic is starting to shift, and I'm going to switch this over to my website. And before I do, one last thing that I think attracts people to this area specifically is the taxes, right? Now, these are just estimators that you can play with, but using 300,000 as a base, since our average price in the area is right around that, you can see property taxes in Kershaw County is the lowest property taxes of the areas that we're going to be talking about, followed up by Lexington County, and then Richland County being the highest of the areas we're talking about. And I know people are looking for places where their money goes a little bit further, and so these small costs here and there do make those big differences. You can see all the new construction that is popping up more and more around the Elgin area. We're just seeing it. As you can see, townhomes to single family homes and so much more. And a lot of these, you're getting a little more land and space the further out you push. Of course, some of them are your traditional neighborhoods that don't have large lots, but you do have some we've seen out here with them, especially as you push out closer to Camden. And we're seeing this a lot more as it's getting harder and harder to find land in the Lexington and Columbia area. And so the builders are pushing out more and more. And as you can see, quite a bit of homes and neighborhoods popping up from a variety of different builders out here. Now, as far as pricing in the Elgin Lugoff area, we're talking about $269,000 on the median for the year-over-year pricing right here at the end of 2024. It's not going to be the lowest budget area that we cover, but one of the lowest budget areas. And again, this is another reason that people are gravitating towards this way. Proximity to everything without having to have that high ticket price that you have in those more populated areas of Northeast Columbia and Lexington. For those of you that don't know who I am, my name is Brandon. My team and I of local real estate agents have truly been helping people from all over the country relocate right here to the Midlands of South Carolina, Lexington, Columbia, and the beautiful Lake Murray. So please don't hesitate to reach out. That way you don't have to go it alone. Next, we're diving into Irmo, South Carolina. This area is a mix of urban, rural, and suburban. Their population came in at 11,685. Their year-over-year growth came in at 0.898%. Came in at 1,660.54 people per square mile. And remember, at the end, we're going to talk about the sleepy town that actually tops this list with year-over-year growth as more people learn about it. And as we dive into Irmo, again, remember those density and population are the town centers. And this is where it gets difficult, especially when it comes to Irmo, as this is probably one of the most difficult areas to explain when I talk to people about the area. Because the issue with Irmo is it's made up of part Lexington County and part Richland County. And I'll show you this in just a second here. As well, you have a mix of what is considered to be Columbia zip code as well as an Irmo zip code. So that's why it can be a little bit confusing when trying to explain the area people. And so oftentimes I tell people the best way to search, even if it doesn't matter to you and you're not looking at, it's kind of based on high schools. Because obviously the high school zoning area can really narrow down a specific location versus, as I said, with the others, if you just search Irmo, you're going to miss part of them. If you just search Lexington County, you're going to miss some of them. Again, we don't have districts on this side of town like you see per se in Columbia, right? Where you have the Forest Acres and Shandon and all these different districts. It's quite confusing as you roll out to these suburbs and areas a little bit more. You have a mix of established neighborhoods over here that you can somewhat do that with, like the Whitehall neighborhoods, Friarsgate, things like those. But you're talking about, neighborhoods from anywhere from 50 homes to a couple hundred. We're not talking about thousands of homes in a section. So that's why I say it's always difficult to explain this when people ask about the area. But let me break this down to you on the map, because I know I just kind of rambled on about those differences, but let me visually put it to you. So this here is where we're looking at what is considered the town limits of Irmo. This is the town of Irmo. Again, it's made up of different counties and stuff, but we'll talk about this. This is what is considered the zip code of Irmo. So this is 29063. This is going to be the entire zip code that makes up Irmo. But as you can see around the area, there's still a ton of areas that we still considered Irmo, still are zoned for Irmo High School and Dutch Fork High School on this side of town, which for reference is all part of the highly rated Lexington Richland 5 school district. Another thing that I think attracts people to this area, but aren't in the Irmo zip code. They're actually going to be in the Columbia zip code. So this is the whole entire Columbia zip code. And as you can see, it trails over here to these different areas that, again, we consider Columbia. Or not Columbia, and Irmo, Chestnut Hill Plantation. I've had people buy in that neighborhood and some of these others right around this area. And again, going back, you have a mix of this part here that is Lexington County. So all of this is going to be Lexington County Irmo and then Richland County Irmo. And so that's why, again, I say a lot of times it's easiest if you're searching this area to be searching based off of school districts, because you have Irmo High School that sits right over here, and you have Dutch Fork High School. And so when you focus on that area specifically, it's really going to highlight this area that we're talking about when it comes to Irmo. Now, let me break down the area a little bit further, because there's some more confusion that I see a lot of times with Irmo. And so as we dive into Irmo, you kind of have two sections of it. And again, this is where I break it down by the schools. So you have the Irmo side of things, and then you have the Dutch Fork side of things. And I'll break them down a little bit further. But the Irmo side of things tends to feel a little bit more urban, right? I think this area confuses people because they're looking for, every time they go to Irmo, they're like, hey, where's their downtown? But if you ever been to the area, you got the Columbiana Center right here, our local mall, as well as all this shopping around it. And so that gets that more urban city-like feel with the shopping complexes versus this small, quaint downtown. They, of course, still have their parks that they do all of their events at. Recently changed names. As you can see, it's Moore Park. It used to be called Irmo Community Park, where they do all of their events, the Irmo Okra Strut, and so much more. And there was talks at one point of trying to put a little downtown strip right over here. I talked about that in another video where I toured the Irmo area. But from what I've heard, that's kind of been shot down just because there's some properties that lie within here that prevent them from finishing that off. But either way, that's where it gets a lot of confusing, because a lot of people are looking for their downtown, and it doesn't feel that way because of all the chain store shopping. Now, one of the other things that people do like about Irmo is, one, not only the proximity, because as you can see where it sits right here, it's an easy commute back to Columbia, so you're not too far away, but you got that mix of, like I talked about, these older established neighborhoods in here. So a lot of this Quail Valley over here, coming down to the Whitehall neighborhood, those are kind of those older established, not HOA neighborhoods. So, you get a little bit more freedom and flexibility with it, a little more space in the yards. But then, of course, on the top side, you have what I like to consider the more rural side, right? Chestnut Hill Plantation sits all around the Harbison Forest here. So you're kind of tucked back in the trees, and then rolling up this way, right? You have the Ascot neighborhood and so many others right around it that are surrounded by trees. It's not as densely populated as you can see up here on the map. And again, I tell people this is kind of the best of both worlds. If you're looking for that rural sense of feel, but the other person in your relationship is like, I don't want to have to drive 40 minutes to go to grocery shopping and so much more, then this area checks that box for a lot of people. Because again, you feel like you're in that rural living, but you're only 10 minutes away from just about every single shopping and the one and only Costco in our entire area. That's right. This is the only Costco in the Midlands of South Carolina. So no matter where you live, this is where you're going. So that's why a lot of people like this side of town, because it's convenient to all this shopping. But again, less of that small town feel. Now let's talk about new construction, because this is, again, another thing that confuses people when they're looking for new construction in the area. When it comes to new construction, again, with a lot of those older established neighborhoods in here, there's not a ton of room in the established part of Irmo to drop in some new construction homes. And then on this more rural side, they've found some land to kind of throw some neighborhoods into, but a lot of that up there, just to be 100% honest, were homes that were on acreage, right? Homes that have an acre of land, 2 acres of land. And so there wasn't these large tracts that have gone up to be developed. You've had a couple that popped up there. Obviously, the River Shoals neighborhood I've talked about in the past with Stanley Martin Homes, but they're kind of wrapping up. They're on their final phases of that. Right around the corner, I talked about in one of my new construction videos, there's a sign for a new D.R. Horton neighborhood. They got the roads in there, so we should see those popping up not too soon in the future. Outside of that, they are finding in established areas like Harbison, the Harbison area, you have some townhomes, as you can see, that have popped up, Harbison Grove. And as well, you also out in Chestnut Hills Plantation, there's a sign for Lennar that's going to be building some townhomes out there as well. So again, not as much land to develop in these areas per se as the more rural areas we talked about before. And so that's why you don't have as much new construction in the Irmo area. But being that proximity to Lake Murray, right? You're so close to the area right here, as well as the river, to be able to just access, to take your boat out, or to come over to the public park side during the season and go paddle boarding, whatever you want to do. And so that's obviously the big perk, is the convenience to everything. But as I tell people, it's not the small town that a lot of people expect, especially when I give the population, because again, we're talking about those city centers versus the entire area in general. Now let's talk about the median price in the Irmo area. This is one of the big reasons that a lot of people attract to this area. Their median price year to date comes in at $240,500. That's right, the most budget friendly area that we talk about. And being so close to a lot of those conveniences, your money just goes a little bit further in this area. And again, stick around to the end, because I'm going to talk about that sleepy little town that's been popping up more and more, that I would say is kind of that mix of, you have stuff close to it, but it's not as densely populated as an area like Irmo. So you want to check that out if you're looking for something like that. Next, we dive into Northeast Northeast Columbia and their master plan communities. We're talking about neighborhoods like Lake Carolina, Wood Creek Farms, and so many more. This area is going to be a little more urban versus suburban. I'm not going to dive into population because it's made up of multiple zip codes and area, but it does say the density of what we consider Northeast Columbia is 8 people per acre, which is equivalent to 5,120 people per square mile. While relative to the other area, it seems like a lot, it is actually considered a mid-density area when you look at it on a national scale. All right, so the next area we're going to be diving into is the master plan communities around Northeast Columbia. And so again, I didn't break this down as far as population-wise to give you a little bit of density, simply because this is kind of a general area that we talk about as real estate agents, and actually is an area within our MLS that is sectioned out. But again, it's made up of multiple zip codes, so it's not easy to just pinpoint and say, check out this area here. But again, just geographically, you have Columbia right here, Lexington coming to the west side, and the northeast part of Columbia. So it's going to be this entire area we talk up here. And of course, the reason I highlight it and the reason I have people attract to this area is because of the master plan communities, right? A lot of you reach out to me and you're looking for those master plan communities, right? These large neighborhoods that sometimes have their own downtowns, country clubs, swimming pools, all the different things. And while you don't see as much of it on the west side of Lexington, outside of maybe the Saluda River clubs, this side of town has multiple neighborhoods like this. Of course, you're talking about neighborhoods like Wildwood down here, older established country club neighborhood within there. And then of course, as you dive in here, Wood Creek Farms, tons of new development in there, as well as established neighborhoods in there. Home prices ranging from, that 200,000 to well over $1 million estate style homes. And you do have the Wood Creek Club golf course in there, country club, where, even if you don't golf, they have the pool down there with multiple swimming lanes and clubhouse and so much more. So you have that section over here. And then of course, as you head up this way, you have Lake Carolina, and this is probably the biggest one I have a lot of people buy in. Don't get me wrong, they bought in all the other ones as well, but Lake Carolina. I've done a ton of videos about Lake Carolina because this is one where you have that man-made lake in there that you can go out there, take your boat out on, go fishing, do all those things. But it's a master plan community with its own downtown. That's right, they have a little downtown there, and they have little restaurants in there, pizza shop, convenience store, hair salon, so much more as well. Lake Carolina is zoned for the highly rated Blythewood High School, another thing that attracts people to this neighborhood specifically. And speaking of schools, on this top half of this neighborhood, you have the elementary and middle school right there in the neighborhood where you can walk to the school. That's right, I know so many of you guys ask for this, as well as the YMCA in the neighborhood. Again, very unique neighborhood. I know so many people ask for those neighborhoods where you can walk to a little downtown, grab some ice cream, where you can walk to the schools, walk to the parks, walk to the YMCA. And this neighborhood is so unique because it has all of those things. But this side of town attracts so many people. And again, because of its convenient location, you're sitting here right in this area where you're not too far from Columbia. You're not too far from Fort Jackson. You're not too far from the villages at Sand Hills Mall over here. So you have all that shopping and everything around it. And that's why this area for a lot of people just attracts to it. Those master plan communities that so many people look for. And again, when we talk about the little town later on, I'll talk about some of the conveniences to these areas. And we'll dive into that a little bit. I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but again, this is one of the popular areas. And that's where, again, you want to reach out to us because we can dive into these and help you. Hey, what you're looking for. We know those neighborhoods that check those boxes for a lot of people. Of course, Lake Carolina being one of them. Now, when it comes to the median price around Northeast Columbia, again, this is an area that is sectioned off by our MLS. It comes in at $288,700. Let's dive into Lexington as well as South Lexington, including the area known as Red Bank. It's going to be true suburbia living, with some areas still feeling a little more rural. Either way, the population of Lexington itself came in at 23,665, had a 2.59% year-over-year growth. Comes in at 1,962 people per square mile. Now the South Lexington area, the Red Bank area, as we dive into these different areas, I'll talk about this, came in with a population of 10,544. It's gonna be the second largest growth behind the next area we will cover. That's right, these popular areas do not even compared to what we're going to talk about next, and it came in at 4.71%. Either way, the population density of that Red Bank area came in at 871.34 people per square mile. All right, coming down to the last two, and as we dive into Lexington again, I know this is probably one of the top areas that I get calls about, but we still have that other area that again is actually more popular right now, year over year growth percentage than Lexington is. That's right. That's why you'll want to stick around to that. But Lexington is another one of those confusing areas that we talk about when trying to explain the area, because of course you have the town of Lexington, which what we're looking at right here. So this whole area is the town of Lexington. They've annexed some of the areas over time, and hey, may annex more areas as time goes on. But this is your town area right here when we were talking about that population density. Now, as we roll out, you also have the county of Lexington, and yeah, that jumped massively, right? So you have the county of Lexington that kind of runs down the river edge of Columbia, runs all the way out to super rural parts of Swansea, Pillion, Batesburg, Leesville, loops around to even the north side of the lake of Chapin, and again, where we talked about in Irmo. And so that's why, again, when you talk about Lexington, you have the town, you have the county, and even more so that makes it confusing, you have Lexington High School, which is going to be on the west side of Lexington over here. And so that's why when people are like, hey, I'm trying to move to Lexington, it's like, what do you mean by that? But we're majorly going to be talking about the areas and the zip codes of Lexington, because that's another aspect of it, right? You have what is considered the 29072 part of Lexington, which is going to be the north part of I-20 right there in Lexington, as you can see, makes up this area. As well as you have the south part of Lexington, 29073, and it's often referred to as, you'll hear people refer to as Red Bank, but we'll break that down here in just a second. But these are the primary areas we're going to talk about: North Lexington and South Lexington, 29072, 29073. And this is primarily going to be made up of the Lexington 1 school district, right? For those learning about the area, you have River Bluff High School over here off of Corley Mill Road. You have Lexington High School out here off of Highway 1. You have White Knoll High School down here in the Red Bank area. You have Gilbert High School on the west side, and technically you also have Pillion High School down south here. That's part of the Lexington 1 school district. So again, we're focusing on this area, and I'm going to break down the areas both a little bit to give you a bit more insight about them, the pros and cons of both these areas. All right, so first let's get started with the north side of Lexington, 29072 part of Lexington. So there's a lot of reasons people target this area. Of course, two big reasons. Downtown Lexington itself. If you watched any of my videos, you talked about the quaint downtown with the Irish bar, Bodie Thai, the amphitheater, Barrio Taco, Moltovino wine that came to the area. All these different small little shops that you can go park downtown, walk around, check out the different areas, and really get to enjoy yourself. And that is such an attraction for a lot of people in recent times. They're looking for those quaint downtowns, and this is it. We personally live on the Lexington side of town, and so just this past weekend of me making this video, we went down to their Christmas event where they put a movie down there. They had rides and slides all for free that you could come and enjoy. And so again, that's one of the things I know a lot of people seek out, is that small town feel, but not being too far from everything, as we talked about earlier, where you have Costco, you have downtown Columbia with all these major things if you need to get it done, right? And you can still see on this map, it's not like there's not stuff, right? World Market, Lidl, Kohl's, Target, Walmart, Publix, Lowe's Foods, so many other shopping that you have. And then just up again on the other side, you have the mall that is less than 30 minutes away from Lexington. So again, I think that's what people really like about it, is that small, quaint suburb that's not too far separated from those major needs. And then of course, the other big thing is Lake Murray, right? The 50,000 acre play place that we talk about all the time. Right here in Lexington on that south side, I already talked about before when we talked about Irmo, you have that public park that you can go down there paddleboarding. We've done it. And then on the north side of the lake, on that Irmo side, you got that boat launch to go head out on the water. And then you have the 1.5 mile walk across the dam that you can enjoy, all convenient to Lexington. And then of course, all the neighborhoods around the lake, some of those neighborhoods that have access to the water right there. And I have the budget friendly lake neighborhood video that I made, so you can dive into those neighborhoods to see what can I really get right there on Lake Murray. And then of course, homes on the water right there. And so again, that's some of the major highlights around Lexington that people seek out, is the lake and the quaint downtown. Now, of course, For every pro, there's going to be a con. This area, because it's grown so much over the years, for a lot of people, the traffic has just gotten a lot. And you've probably seen in the comments a lot, people talking about how bad the traffic has gotten. You know, I always tell people this was a small town that just grew super fast. And because of it, the town kind of chasing their tail, making sure the infrastructure is there. It grew faster than they were ready for. And so you got still a lot of 2-lane roads that run around. You know, especially over here, I've talked about in another video where I broke down Lexington. You'll want to check that out if you're considering Lexington, where you get a lot of traffic here off of Longs Pond at the end of the day, and it backs up onto the interstate just because of this 2-lane road over here. Just so many different areas around that struggle with traffic. You know, Highway 378, Sunset Boulevard. I always tell people the pro and con of this area is you have every single shopping that you can think of as I zoom in here, right? Kohl's, Lowe's, Home Depot, World Market, like to talk about, Target down this direction, Staples, TJ Maxx, all these things, Hobby Lobby, all these things. But the negative of that is it creates a ton of traffic as cars are moving in and out. As well, I've talked about with their fast growth, you know, you have River Bluff High School, like to talk about, off a 2-lane road. And so you get a ton of traffic as school gets out, trying to converse down these roads. And with the elementary school and middle schools over here, Lexington High School over here, right? It's on a 4-lane highway. So right in front of high school doesn't get bad, but all these 2-lane roads shooting off to get people home can get really backed up during those peak times. And so again, that's where I say some of the negatives to these areas tend to be is the traffic of just a growing suburb that just grew really fast, like I said. And as well, one of the other big contributing factors to it is the new construction that we'll talk about in just a little bit. But the fact that, like I talked about on the Lexington side of town versus Northeast Columbia, where you have those master plan communities that, you know, are 1,000 acres with a ton of homes encompassed within it with the schools all around it. On this Lexington side, because you just have random new construction neighborhoods that pop up that may be, you know, less than 100 homes all the way up to a couple hundred homes. And so you have entrances and exits to these neighborhoods popping up all over the place. And so it's really created more of an urban sprawl than true suburbia is what it feels like, just adding to that traffic. But again, there's so many positives that people love about this area. Gibson Park that they recently redone, and so many others that just draw people to the area. The ballpark rec center. Again, you want to check out those Lexington videos to learn more about this. I did a driving tour where I took you to all these places, and I also did a map tour where I broke this down even more, those pros and cons. But again, let's also talk about the south side of Lexington, and I'll circle back to some new construction neighborhoods on both sides of the town, on this north side as well as the south side. So again, when we talk about the south side of Lexington, you'll often hear people say, hey, the Red Bank area. Now, let me pull this up. I just find it funny. So this is technical Red Bank. Now, I tell people Red Bank is an unincorporated community. It's a census designated place. There's no town of Red Bank. There's no Red Bank City Hall. There's no Red Bank Police. It's just a census area and a unincorporated community, right? And so as you can see these lines, it's actually a relatively small area, and it ends right there at Platte Springs. So when we talk about new construction, a lot of it is actually outside of technical Red Bank. You know, and everyone calls it different things, right? I like to call it the White Knoll area because you have White Knoll High School over here, and it's not technically in Red Bank, the 29073 part of Lexington. Again, that's where it gets a little bit confusing. But if you say the Red Bank area, I still know what you mean. But in all technicalities, a lot of that new construction we're going to talk about isn't actually in the Red Bank area. Some of it is, and we'll talk about it. But either way, the south side of Lexington. So going back again, I talked about this in that Lexington video. When I first moved to the area, I was working as an EMT on the ambulance, and I worked for Lexington County, and we used to do the state of the counties. And back then, this was circa around 2015, 2016-ish when we first moved to the area. The town originally had perceived that everything was going to move west towards Gilbert. There was a lot, they had widened Highway 1 out this way, Highway 370A, and they just foresaw a lot of the growth moving out this west side. However, everything tended to move south faster than it moved west. As I talked about with that population growth, 4% year over year, second largest area that we're covering, right? More so than that north side of Lexington that we talked about. And again, it just grew fast, and you had a lot of new developments popping up this way. But of course, with that, you had a lot of shopping as we zoom in here. So when we first moved to the area, you had this shopping center here with the Walmart and Lowe's, Food Line and all of that. But since then, this whole shopping complex over here, and I'll switch the layers, you can see the public shopping center over here. This is all new. Tractor Supply, they put a Chick-fil-A in there. And then, of course, this development that you see growing right now. They're working on that construction as we speak. And it's been announced that they're going to have a Lowe's food in there, Lowe's grocery store. They're also going to have I believe, a Planet Fitness over here. You're going to have Chipotle, Panda Express, Dunkin' Donuts, Big Marble Academy. Just so many different things. You know, there's a lot of rumors of if there's going to be a restaurant over there, because I'll tell you, from someone that lives on this side of town, right? You got San Jose's that's sitting right here, Mexican restaurant. You have Carolina Wings. You got a Mexican restaurant in here. Most of the other stuff is fast food. And so that's what a lot of times, if we're going out to dinner ourselves, personally living on this side of town, we head to downtown Lexington to grab food or to Columbia. But if we drop a restaurant in here, then obviously that's going to create a lot more convenience. I'm going to zoom back out. Again, going back to that, when I talk about that, that's another reason a lot of people like this area, is because, as you can see, it kind of creates this triangle to Columbia and to Lexington. And so again, like I talked about on the north side of Lexington, with the traffic you can get, if you're living in kind of one of these coves down here on the lake, trying to get out, get to the interstate and get to Columbia can take a little bit longer, where, you know, on this side of town, you can just shoot down Platte Springs, shoot down some of these roads and get to Columbia fairly easy, or get to downtown Lexington. So that's one of the big reasons this area has grown so much, is just because of the convenience. Your price point is actually going to be, when I give you price points here, it's not going to break down the two side by side, but I can tell you the south side of Lexington price per square foot has, ever since I've been in real estate, has been less than the Lexington side of things, the north side of Lexington. And so your money goes further, but you still get all those conveniences. Now let's talk about new construction in the area. And as you can see, as I pull it up here on my website, ton more new construction in this part of town than all the other areas that we've hit. Now, I will tell you, from talking with some of the people on the building side, they're having a harder and harder time trying to find land. And so you're starting to see things push out more rural. And so we are starting to see things finally push out that west direction. And there's 3 developments already popping out that way. And I expect plenty more, as well as the south side as well. I talked about in another video how there's a big neighborhood that's, you know, hundreds of acres that's going to end up being developed on this south side. So as this area picks up more and more and develops more and more, we're going to see it pushing out. But let's hit on a couple different neighborhoods in this area that I want to talk about. And so we'll start on the south side of Lexington. The ones I hear about most is, of course, the Bluefield neighborhood on the south side of Lexington right here. You know, with their community pool, with their lazy river in there. I've done a ton of videos about the Bluefield neighborhood. You have that one, as well as coming back down Old Orangeburg. You have Ashton Lakes, that neighborhood. That's going to be going back. That's a Mungo neighborhood, the Bluefield one. Ashton Lakes is going to be a mix of McGuinn homes, as well as you're also going to have Eastwood homes in there. And then, of course, heading back this way, you have Copper Crest, the Stanley Martin neighborhood in there. They have both single family homes as well as they have townhomes. And then 2 over here that I want to hit, you have Hendricks Farms. That's going to be right here off the interstate. That's going to be a new Mungo neighborhood. Not Hendricks Farms. I apologize. I don't know why I said that. That one's actually going to be Hidden Springs. Hendricks Farms on the other side that we'll talk about, but Hidden Springs over here. And as you can see with some of their pricing, right, your money just goes a little bit further over here. You can get new construction homes in that 300,000 point, right? And then, of course, the neighborhood of Longview. Had a lot of people buy in the Longview neighborhood, Stanley Martin homes. And I'm going to be making a future video about this because there's a big change happening right now in the Longview neighborhood by Stanley Martin. So you're going to want to watch that new construction update if Longview does pique your interest. They're coming down to their last phase in there. But either way, let's zoom out and let's talk about the north side of Lexington, some neighborhoods that we have over here. Again, since I already said it, Hendricks Farms that you have right over here by Lexington High School, that's going to be, you're going to have Mungo Homes that's building right there. They do have some townhomes up here as well, Murray Village. You're also going to have coming back here, and there may not be any available right now, but you have Bar Lake, right? The Bar Lake neighborhood by Stanley Martin Homes. I've had multiple people buy in this neighborhood here, and their final phase should be coming at sometime probably spring to mid next year, if not later next year, that final phase of Bar Lake. And then of course, you're talking about brand new ones up here. You have Carriage Estates right over this direction. I've had people already buy in this neighborhood. This is a Pulte Homes neighborhood. And they're actually going to be introducing some new floor plans to neighborhood, bringing in some different price points. Because as you can see right now, most of them are going to be that 500,000 mark. But again, new product that's going to bring new price points. And so again, that's the Lexington area. And just as a bonus, as we wrap this up, because I've had people buy out this direction. And again, when we talk about Lexington County and so much more, Chapin. And it is pronounced Chapin, right? People always ask me, Chapin, it's Chapin. So Chapin is a small town right up here on the west side of, the Irmo over here. It is part of Lexington County, but so it has a small little quaint downtown. It's just not as developed as the Lexington side, still relatively small, but you have, of course, a ton of popular neighborhoods over there. Timberlake Country Club right there on the lake, the only golf course on the lake with a bunch of neighborhoods surrounding it. Palmetto Shores down here by Mungo Homes, lakefront neighborhood with still new construction homes being built over there. And again, Chapin Place and so many other new construction over here, as well as resale. So I've had people buy up in Chapin. So I didn't highlight it specifically because less people per se bought over here than some of the other areas we're talking about, but I don't want to forget about Chapin when it comes to the Lexington area. Diving into that median price point for the area, when Lexington, we saw year to date, 315,000. Again, this is going to be both a combination of that 29072 part of Lexington as well as the 29073 part of Lexington.
Last but not least, we're diving into Blythewood, South Carolina. That's right, this once small rural town has been topping people's lists for numerous reasons that we'll dive into. But their population came in at 4,890. They had a whopping 7.64% year-over-year growth. That's right, like I said, not just what my clients have found, but statistically the growth outpacing all of the other areas. Their population density came in at 448.96 people per square mile, less densely populated than all the other areas we talked about. Again, a lot of room for growth in this area, and let's dive into it.
Again, last but not least, we are diving into the town of Blythewood. Again, I've had more and more people buy out this direction for numerous reasons, and as you saw, statistically, their growth has been above all of the others that we covered. That's right, percentage-wise. Now, there's multitude of reasons of why we are seeing that, and I'm going to dive into it in this section. But first, let me give you a proximity or perspective of the area. So this is actual town of Blythewood map right here, as you can see. And so you have downtown Blythewood right here in this section, and then all the town areas that wrap around it. Now, when we talk about this, we're going to be talking about the entire Blythewood area, the zip code 29016 that makes up all of Blythewood. Because again, very small town as you saw in that, but still a ton of growth. And there's a couple different reasons we've seen this. So one is going to be that rural feel, like I talked about, with that population density being less than areas like Elgin, but so much closer to all of those amenities, right? You're talking about Fort Jackson, 17 miles, 22 minutes. Downtown Columbia, 18 miles, 25 minutes, where all the hospitals are, right? I know I didn't hit them specifically in the other ones, but you have your major hospitals down that direction. And there are some up this direction. I'll talk about that. Lake Murray that we talked about in the Lexington side, 28 miles, 35 minutes. And another big reason a lot of people actually like this area is the proximity to Charlotte, right? Charlotte is obviously a major hub where you have airports up there. You have so many other shopping complexes that we don't have down here. The IKEAs, the Apple stores, and so much more. Charlotte Airport. It's on the south side of Charlotte, but you're talking about 77.4 miles, 1 hour and 10 minutes. So obviously, again, that proximity is so many different things is one of the big reasons I've had a lot of people choose Blythewood. Obviously, in recent times, the biggest announcement is Scout Motors coming to the Blythewood area. That's right. Scout Motors coming back, building their EV vehicle. They're now owned by Volkswagen, and they are diligently working on developing this area. And I know you can't see it in this map here, but it's going to be in this entire area here. And so obviously it's bringing a ton of jobs to the area. And so obviously there's a lot of people that are relocating to area for work. Now, with that said, I've said it time and time again. Well, yes, I've had clients that are working at Scout that have moved to Blythewood. A majority that I had moved to Blythewood were actually not working for Scout Motors. So it's not just the Scout Motors things that bring them to the area. It's so many other things that we'll dive into. Now, when we zoom in here, you can kind of see downtown Blythewood right now is still kind of chain store-ish, right? You got your Taco Bells, your Hardee's, your Bojangles, IGA, Food Lion over here, right? It's not that quaint downtown feel that per se Lexington has. Now, with that said, they've already started that transition, especially with Doco Meadows Park over here. So Doco Meadows Park, they have their amphitheater over there. They have the grass fields, the green space, walking trails, and so much more over here, right? I talk about all the time, being such a small town, it took Lexington forever to get their amphitheater with the concerts, but Blythewood is already steps ahead with that. As well, they have renderings of what this whole area is going to turn into. And I can foresee over time, this stretch here where the train depot is turning into that quaint kind of downtown. Again, it's a very rural town right now, and so it doesn't have that yet, but they're projecting that growth and to be able to continue to make that. But you still have all the parks right around the area, which is what a lot of people like. Is I have all the amenities that you can get in Lexington with the amphitheater and the parks and so much more, but it's a more rural feel. And that's what I've noticed people like, right? A little bit more yard space. And we'll talk about that when we talk about new construction, but years back, their density, the way they built these neighborhoods had larger lots. Now that's changed as their kind of density is switching and it's getting more popular. You're starting to see the newer homes with smaller lots, but those older ones, these older established neighborhoods in there have much larger lots, and a lot of people are attracted to that. As well, highly rated Blythewood High School sitting right here. And so again, that goes to kind of one of the things I was talking about earlier without trying to segue is these neighborhoods over here, Lake Carolina. I have people that like the conveniences of Blythewood, but live in those master plan communities. And so it's an easy commute back to Blythewood, whether you're working at the Scout plant or you're just trying to hit Doco Meadows Park. Because again, this being area more urban, outside of the downtown in Lake Carolina that does their events, Columbia itself, the northeast part doesn't have a downtown where they do events. And so it's an easy hop and drive right here to this part of Blythewood to be able to go to those. As well, I'll tell you, I have another client that lived up there that they found a little sweet spot by going up to Ridgeway. Ridgeway does have very rural town, but they have their downtown with their little shops. And they said it's an easy drive to hit their downtown as well. So again, one of the other benefits of Blythewood is all of those amenities right around it. And of course, you got to talk about going back the other facilities that are in the area. Not too far down here, you have hospitals. You have what used to be Providence Hospital that is now owned by MUSC that sits right here at this interchange. And so you're not too far from the hospitals. And again, Lexington Medical Center built a facility here off of Killian Road. So you have access to all those things while still having that rural feel that you get of Blythewood. Now, with that said, of course, like I said, pros and cons, let's talk about it. So again, as I mentioned, small town Blythewood, majority of your shopping, big shopping, is going to be down here off of Killian Road, right? As you zoom in here, you got your Super Kroger over here, you got Lowe's Home Improvement, all these, One Life Fitness, used to be Move Fitness, switched over. You got restaurants, fast food, all kinds of different things in this section here. Again, there's not a ton outside the small grocery stores, the IGA and the Food Lion that we talked about in Blythewood. So that's the con I've heard from people, is having to drive a little bit of ways. Or, like we talked about before, the Villages at Sandhills Mall, that's going to be over here on this side of town. So that's the con. Being a more small town, they don't have all that major shopping in the area quite yet. But let's dive into some of the neighborhoods that I know really attract people to this area. Because like I said, kind of a little bit larger lots in these. hit the major ones. So I made a video about this, but the Columbia Country Club and the Windermere Club, all around this area here, this loop, Longtown Road, you have a ton of different neighborhoods, and there's actually some new construction in here as well. And you have some established neighborhoods, larger lots, and as well as you have those new constructions. So you got a good mix in there of that. And a lot of people like that country club feel, still close to that Killian Shopping Center, and then obviously an easy drive back to Blythewood for all of their events. And like I talked about, going up to Ridgeway to hit that. As well, of course, over here, Cobblestone Park Golf Club, right? This golf course neighborhood, gated neighborhood, people attract to the amenities they have within that neighborhood. So that's going to be another one in the area. And then Ashley Oaks. This Stanley Martin neighborhood is wrapping up right now. Larger lots, those larger estate homes. Again, tons of different neighborhoods that people attract to the area. And one of the other big announcements is, of course, because of the Scout plant, you're seeing a lot more growth. And let's roll over to new construction. So you got a couple different new construction neighborhoods and some on the horizon that I'll talk about. So you have Grand Arbor by Pulte Homes out here. So it's going to be a mix of their Pulte line as well as their Syntex line. They still have a lot of development going out that way. This neighborhood, I've talked about, tons of amenities in there. You're going to have pickleball courts. This is the first new construction neighborhood I've seen that have pickleball courts. Some of the established neighborhoods are transferring their tennis courts into pickleball courts, but they're going to have that. They have their pool, they have their pond, soccer fields, so much more. And then, of course, like I talked about over here, Ashley Oaks, the Ashley Oaks neighborhood. That one, they're wrapping up that. That's going to be tail end of that. But on the horizon, you definitely do have some new construction coming. Mungo, as I talked about in one of those videos, they bought some land up this direction, have a large neighborhood they're going to be building. And of course, the biggest one, as we scroll down this direction, heading back halfway in between, I'm going to switch it over to this map because it shows it better. Right here around Oak Hills Golf Club, right? If you watch my video, Crystal Lagoon. These are man-made lagoons that look like resorts in Cancun's, and they're massive. And they have hotels around them, restaurants, shops, and so much more. And they're building one right over here, right around Oak Hills Golf Club. And of course, there's going to be new development all around that resort. And so again, such a highlight that people are excited to see. And again, right on the outskirts of Blythewood. So that's why so many reasons Blythewood has become such a popular area that people are relocating to. Now let's dive into the median price point for the Blythewood area. It's actually not a designated MLS area, so I had to use some other resources to help narrow this down, but it came in at $358,000 year to date. Again, one of the most expensive areas that we talked about, but just a massive desire that we've had more and more people relocating to the Blythewood area.
You want to check out this playlist right here. We'll actually take you on tours of a lot of those different new construction neighborhoods I talked about, right? We're talking about those new construction neighborhoods in Blythewood, as well as those in Lake Carolina, and then on the Lexington side of town around Lake Murray. So check out this playlist to learn and tour more of those new construction neighborhoods in detail.